Good morning, Facebook. Hey, this is Jim Blythe. You're watching the Veterans Impact Show. I'm here for you, and I also want to let you know Cedric White is here. We are a great team. We're going to make a great program. We're talking about African American history. We're talking about some great people, some people we actually encountered along the way. So we're going to be on in just a second. Stay with us. Join us on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where our motto is Charlie Mike. Continue the mission. I'm your host, Jim Blythe, U.S. Navy Vietnam veteran and certified senior advisor. Join me as we feature veterans who continue the mission of leadership and commitment in our communities after serving our great nation. Why, you never know who you're going to meet or where we're going to go. So welcome aboard. We've got the end of February, and this is Black History Month. So I want to tell you, we're going to have a great program for you today. Some really great facts that you need to know. First of all, I want to introduce Cedric White, minister, marriage counselor, great friend. And let me tell you, he's a really good preacher. Cedric, welcome aboard, brother.
Glad to be here, Jim. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be included on the show, and even as we come to the end of February and talk about Black History Month, it's great, and I appreciate your willingness to let's talk about some of the topics about Black history.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I want to make another point too, Cedric. Your marriage counseling for veterans that you did, that Diane and I attended last weekend,
Yes.
was about the best I have ever seen. It
Well,
really goes to the heart of a lot of veteran and active duty military marital issues. It was terrific. So I want to suggest to people, go to Healing Thine Hearts Ministries. Is that correct?
yes,
Cedric?
healingthinehearts.org. Just healing
.org,
thine.
and look it up. If
Yeah.
you get a chance, go to one of Cedric's deal. If you want to get married, go to one of Cedric's deal. If you are married, you go to one of Cedric's deals. If you don't want to get married, go to one of Cedric's deals.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I want to thank DBTV Network for putting us on Amazon Fire and Roku and the other things, wonderful things you're doing for us. Also, the AUN TV Network out in Northern California. Thank you for being part of this. And guys, share this on YouTube, share this on Facebook. We want you to get involved. Let us know. Send us an email. Give me a call, 214-502-4600. And to Joe in Jacksonville, thank you for the texts and emails you've sent me. What a great guy. Navy veteran as well. Hey, I got to tell you, it's important that we remember history, and especially the great men and women. So, Cedric, let's start, and let's talk about the one we selected first to talk about, Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I even want to go back just a little further before Dr. King in understanding even why we have the origin of Black History Month, right? A lot of us, we have it, but we don't know where it came from or how it came about. And it was the mindset or thought of a gentleman by the name of Carter G. Woodson, who saw that after not being able to participate in some of the American history, as a matter of fact, it was the American Historical Association, that although he was a due paying member, he was not allowed, he was barred from attending. And so he decided that he'd start to collect some of the information in reference to African American contributions that were being overlooked, that were being ignored, some even suppressed. And it began as Black History Week to coincide with Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. And it was later expanded to Black History Month. And so, of course, as we grew up, and I love the fact, Jim, that you have a lot more of the personal history with the likes of a Martin Luther King than I do, right? When it comes to having been in his presence in giving speeches and so much and so on. So, I mean, a wonderful civil rights leader, stood for nonviolence. He was a minister, had a lot of things that are attributed to the advancement of equality, all equality, not just African American equality, but equality for women, equality for other races, and the coming together of our races, which is where we should reside as one nation under God. Right? You have to love that.
Absolutely. In 1966, I was a sophomore at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And in the fall, they invited a member of the, at that time, civil rights movement. And guess who came? Dr.
Mm.
Martin Luther King. And he spoke in McFarland Auditorium. And I was there. And as he left, I was close enough to come a little bit of contact with him. But I got to tell you something, Cedric. His speech live in McFarland Auditorium was tremendously inspirational. And he talks about children of all races and people coming together. It was truly, truly an inspirational speech. And as I got close enough to see him, there was an intensity and a passion in his eyes. And he really wasn't a very, very big man.
No, it wasn't.
I mean, you know, you'd have thought he was a giant at 6'6", the way he spoke. He was only probably, I guess, 5'8" or 5'9", but the intensity of that man was truly, truly amazing. Then many, many years later, I'm at a VFW, and I'm sitting next to a black gentleman, and I come to find out, and his son was sitting across, and he introduced the two of us. He wanted us to sit together, and his name was Brigadier General Boggins, and Brigadier General Boggins was a Tuskegee Airman who flew in Korea and then flew in Vietnam, Blue Phantoms, and went on to be a brigadier general, an African American. And I said, what a wonderful thing you did in leading the way to being a flag officer. And he just kind of downplayed it, very humble man. And I said, gee, in 1966, I was there when Martin Luther King, well, he lights up and he said, you mean such and such? And I go, huh? And he said, I grew up with him. Our fathers were ministers, and he was my best friend. And we played, we ran together, we did all these things. And he said, Jim, you just don't know how passionate that man was and how he impressed and what he did. And I said, General Boggins, he must have been unbelievable because I saw him for just a brief period of time. And the things he talked about Martin Luther King, General Boggins did, brought him to life for me. A real kid, two little black guys who were sons of ministers in the Deep South in the 1940s and 50s. That was something. That was really something to hear those stories. And I've tried to get General Boggins on more than once, but I think age and time has really taken their toll. But brought Martin Luther King alive for me by telling stories about him. So I highly recommend that anybody, you can go to Wikipedia, you can look up anything you want to about Dr. King. He was an amazing, amazing man, and I got to be there to see him.
One of the great things, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but one of the great things about Dr. Martin Luther King, small in stature, but gigantic in spirit, gigantic in drive, gigantic in his ideology of changing literally the world, his mindset on, like I said, the aspect of doing it, telling the truth as the Bible states, telling the truth, but telling the truth in love, doing it in a way that, sometimes the truth hurts, but I always compare it to having surgery. When you have to have surgery to have some part of cancer removed, the surgery itself hurts. However, the purpose of it is for healing. And what Dr. Martin Luther King did was bring forth some truth in a land where a lot of people's ideology and mindset were stuck in a way that literally was simply based upon the color of a person's skin as opposed to their character, which is what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. And he brought it to the forefront unapologetically and in a way that, listen, we're not here to try to harm anybody. We're just here to try to get the truth out and to try to be treated as human, to try to be treated as right, and as again a Christian nation, what the way we should stand and the way we should present ourselves. And he did it.
Cedric, I grew up in Texas, and my mother was from Corsicana, and my grandfather and my father were from Athens, Texas.
Okay.
So small town Texas in the deep South in the 1950s and 60s. I saw it, but I was very fortunate. My grandfather Blythe was a retired 32 years in the United States Navy, a Mustang, made it to command of a ship. He always said to me, never judge a man by his color, judge him by his actions. My other grandfather had grown up in Corsicana. His parents were divorced. His mother died, and he grew up in the Coleman family, which was a black family. The Coleman family were part of our family. So I grew up with the Coleman family being part of my family in Corsicana, Texas, in the 1950s and 60s. And I remember the Colemans. And so I had a different kind of thing than the mindset of most white people in the Deep South during that time. So Dr. King's impression he made on me really resonated. But let's go on and let's talk about some of the things that went on to start happening that started basically in World War II.
Yes.
And I think one of the most interesting things that started in World War II was the Tuskegee Airmen. A lot of people have seen the movie, The Red Tails.
Right.
A lot of people may have seen the book about the Red Tails. Let me tell you something. General Boggins was a Tuskegee Airman who flew in Korea.
Right.
And those guys, if you've seen the movie, the hell, the discrimination, the crap that they went through was terrible, totally uncalled for. And yet they had such passion and perseverance that they went on to be a highly awarded, the 99th was highly awarded squadron during World War II. Out of the many missions that they went with the bombers to go over Germany, they had the best, the most success in terms of shooting down and protecting the bombers. They lost less bombers than any other squadron.
That's right.
And in one of the attacks, they took out 3 of the jets, the German jet fighters, the JU whatever. When you go and look at Wikipedia, you go and look, if you pull up Tuskegee Airmen, what those men did. And in the movie, it actually shows where some of the white pilots, when they found out that these guys were the Red Tails, they didn't realize it. They went, I don't know how, but I want the Red Tails with us.
Right.
And it changed the perception in many cases of the military of these guys. And one of the scenes that's in that movie is President Roosevelt's wife. She went for a flight with a flight instructor in the Tuskegee Airmen. And a lot of people at that time were so racially prejudiced and so opinionated about African Americans. And she goes, man, these guys are great. They can fly. She did a lot to help move that along and get them. And then their perseverance, their passion, their persistence, and their patience, they earned one of the top places in history in our nation's military, without a doubt.
Exactly. One of the things that I get the honor to sit and talk with people about, and I've done it surprisingly more than I thought I ever would, is to sit and explain to individuals and sometimes crowds the difference between real prejudice and racism, right? And a lot of things that were encountered even by the Tuskegee Airmen. It was out of prejudice, and prejudice is simply to prejudge, right? Out of ignorance, because I do not know, and I've been told something, or I have a preconceived idea, and until I learn the difference and see the difference, then I hold on to that preconceived idea. Whereas racism is a decision that I'm going to dislike you, Jim, because your skin color, the amount of melanin that you have in your skin is less than mine, and vice versa. I have more, and so I dislike you for that reason. But if true prejudice is put on the line, and once I learn the difference, that shows the character that I have, and that is, okay, wow, I had a preconceived idea based upon whatever it was. Could have been my parents, could have been a situation that I was in. But once I get to know you, Jim, and I realized that all the things, the preconceived ideas that I had were incorrect, but if I choose to hold on to them, then we're talking racism. Then we're talking a system, regardless as to how good you are, how smart you are, how talented you are. There's some that still choose to hold on to that thing today. And that's what some things that still have to be overcome. And those are the things that the Tuskegee Airmen had to overcome, regardless of the talent and their persistence, their perseverance to keep going. They still had to overcome a lot of that.
They had to overcome some horrible, horrible things.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I remember as a kid in small town Texas as well as in Dallas, colored restrooms, colored
Mm-hmm.
people were not allowed to do this, colored people
Mm-hmm.
were not allowed to do that. It was really, really tough. And that was all. I think it was ignorance, because what was really crazy is you would go, and as I got into college, you would go to some of the nightclubs that were in Dallas, and James Brown and the Famous Flames were there, and everybody was like, "Yeah." There wasn't a black person in the audience.
Right.
And Bo Diddley, I saw Bo Diddley. And everybody was rocking to the great
Right.
music, and yet there was no black members in the audience. And
Yeah.
over time, we have changed that.
Yes.
But let me tell you, that was strictly ignorance. Everybody loved the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, everybody loved the food.
Right.
And when you take a look at black history, without the black families, without the black music, we wouldn't have rock and roll today, because that's what Elvis set up. And without that, we wouldn't have soul food today. And boy, I couldn't live. I could not live without soul food, because I grew up on it. Hey, this is Jim Blythe and Cedric White, and we're having a ball talking about black history and how important it is. We don't want to do away with it. We don't want to ever see that repeated again. And that's
right.
what history does, is it teaches us not to repeat the past. It teaches us not to go back to those things. So we'll be right back after these words from all of our partners. Hey, share us on YouTube, share us on Facebook, and get out there and be a part of Veterans Impact Show. We're here for you today. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. And thanks to our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation.
Well, listen, this is Cedric White. I'm co-host of the Veterans Impact Show, here with the host, Jim Blythe. Thanking Diane for being here. Nathaniel, thanking you for all your help that you're providing. And today we're here talking about what Black History Month means to us and to others, the contributions that, let me say this, Jim. Let me say this. It's a bit of a shame that we have to have a designated time that we focus on Black history, or what is it, Cinco de Mayo, or any other time, and that's simply due to the divisions that we've had. So we've had to carve out times where we do that. But thank goodness we've gotten to that point to where we can come together and do just that. We were talking about some of the things that Martin Luther King contributed to the desegregation of a lot of areas in our Black history, the breaking down the barriers of the Birmingham campaign, the I have a dream speech that has been probably repeated more than almost any other speech in history as we talk about equality in this country. Martin Luther King being the youngest person to ever receive a Nobel Peace Prize. This guy, because he was willing to stand up and ultimately paid the ultimate sacrifice for freedom, which quite often many of us would shrink back if it came down to that. But when we go from a biblical perspective, what greater love does a man have that he give his life for a friend? And that's what we're talking about, dedicating our life to the freedoms and to the equalities that every human should have here in our country. That's what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. And Cedric, in that wonderful conversation that I had with Brigadier General Boggins, who was Martin Luther King's childhood friend, he said he talked to Martin not too long before that actually happened. And and Martin said to him, brother, they're going to get me. And he knew it was coming, and he didn't shy away from it.
Right.
That reminds me of a biblical sense of another man who knew it was coming, and walked into the fire. Now, Tuskegee, we of the military have led the way. In World War II, we were talking about the Tuskegee Airmen. We were talking about the contributions and the respect that were garnered because the ignorance got blown away by their persistence,
right,
their passion, their dedication. Without a doubt, they were the best.
Right.
The 99th was the best. And if you don't believe me, go find that movie, The Red Tails.
Right.
Go read the book. Go look it up on Wikipedia. Another man who did something phenomenal, and I want to bring this to light as well, in a great movie and a great book, was written about Jesse Leroy Brown, who was the first African-American Navy combat pilot, first Navy pilot. Amazing man. He had to overcome all kinds of terrible things. I read the book, Devotion. I'm sorry.
Devotion.
And there is a movie called Devotion about this man and what he overcame and how his passion to fly started as a child. And he went to, I've got it here, but I'm not going to dig into it. Go look him up. Jesse Leroy Brown. Here's a picture of him that we're showing. This guy, against all odds, went to a college in Ohio. He grew up in Mississippi. His family, they were tenant farmers. He went north. He got an education. He became a naval flight officer. Huge accomplishment. Huge accomplishment with all kinds of barriers at that time. And he was flying the 4FU Corsair in Korea. Now, I've never flown one. I've flown a lot of different planes, but I've never flown one. But everybody who's ever flown one of those things tells me that it's an unbelievable plane to fly. That it's, when you put the pedal to the metal, when you put the hammer down, that thing goes. Giant radial engine. In the movie Devotion, it shows him practicing over the swamps in Virginia at very, very low altitude.
Right.
It also shows him in a scene attacking a bridge that nobody else could really get because he had developed that skill. He was fearless. He was fearless. He was also so passionate.
Exactly. I have a saying that I use when I'm teaching my students. I always ask them, finish this statement for me. Practice makes, and they'll always say perfect. And it's like, no, practice makes permanent. And he was willing to practice during the time of peace so that in a time of war, he could accomplish those things that other pilots weren't willing to do so. And we have to do those. Those are the kind of things that in order to accomplish certain things in life, when we have the opportunity in the quiet times, right? We have to practice those things so that they become permanent, so that when it's time to utilize them in life, when it's time to stand up for injustice, stand up for a friend, to protect life, then it's muscle memory. You don't have to figure it out at that point. And that's what he was able to do.
Now, let's go forward a little bit in this story of Jesse, that he was shot down. And I think what really happened was maybe a small arms in the Chosin Reservoir in those battles in Korea.
Right.
And it was cold. I've actually talked to veterans who were in the Chosin battles, and the first thing I say is, "What was it like?" And he said, "Cold. It was so cold." And so his plane got hit. They think it might have been either a fuel line or hydraulic line. And what happened was his plane went down. He had a wingman, and Nathaniel is going to put up his picture when we come back of the two of them became really good friends. And the story that's portrayed in the movie, I've read in the book, it's a factual story. So we're going to talk about how two men worked together, a white man and a black man.
Yes.
And the white man tried to save Jesse's life. And Jesse Leroy Brown, you've got to look him up. You've got to look up the story of devotion. You got to read the book, and you got to see the movie. So we're going to be right back after these words from all of our partners. And one of our partners is Fairway Independent Mortgage. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you about what I do, and I'm here to help you. This is Jim Blythe with Cedric White, the great Cedric White. You need to hear his talk about marriage. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show, and thanks to our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation. I want to say a special thank you to my company, Fairway Independent Mortgage, for supporting this, but also supporting the American military. Our American Warriors Project has given away over $1 million worth of service dogs to veterans. We are a faith-based company, Fairway Independent Mortgage. We're nationwide. We got over 1,000 loan officers. Look us up. We support veterans. We do VA loans. We do all of the kinds of loans, and I do reverse mortgage loans. I work with a lot of elderly veterans. I'm here to help, but when it's veterans that are talking to me about divorce, I say, please get with Cedric. He's my brother.
Yeah, hopefully it's not always about divorce, but sometimes it's as little as help me to deal with a situation that I'm not used to. Sometimes I tell guys, because most of the time it's the guys that are hesitant to come in, and we'll tell them, listen, if you have a transmission problem, who do you take it to? What do you do? Most of us can't fix our own transmission. We'll take it to a transmission specialist. Well, my wife and I, Michelle, we are relationship specialists. That's what we help couples to deal with, whether it's pre-married, marital, or unfortunately on occasion divorce care. But we're here to help you with that. So we'd love to engage.
The other thing that I do, I'm part of the Divorce Professionals Association of all people in walks of life that help that. And what I do is I do financial counseling, and I help them use that home equity or dissolve that relationship where it's a win-win situation for both of them. And I've done a lot of divorce settlements where the house is the only asset, and both end up with being in a winning situation. Now, let's finish this story about Jesse Brown.
Yes.
And Nathaniel, if you'll put up that photograph, these two men were flying together that day. These two men, Thomas J. Hudner was his wingman, and Jesse Brown's plane got shot, and he made a crash landing in North Korea. And when he did, the frame of the airplane and the engine buckled, and Jesse was trapped. And Thomas J. Hudner, who was his friend and his wingman, crash landed about 100 yards away from Jesse. It's beautifully portrayed in the film.
Yes.
And he jumped out, and this was with North Korean troops in the area that were probably hunting for these two planes and pilots.
Right.
And he did everything he humanly could to get Jesse out, but Jesse was trapped and couldn't get out.
Yes.
And his legs were broken. And so they also, Hudner got the helicopter directed to come in to try and save Jesse. And in the movie, it's the best portrayal I've ever seen of these two guys trying to help Jesse get out of the plane.
Yeah. What I like about when I watched the movie, you could tell that the racial line had totally disappeared between these guys. Now we are two brothers in combat, trying to survive, trying to stand up for what our nation stands up for. And that is that if nothing else comes from this show, if nothing else comes from the life and the example that you and I, Jim, are trying to or exemplify, that is the fact that race should really have nothing to do with it. The fact that if you need help or I need help or we can help others, let's do that. Let's join arms and do that, even to the point of death, right? Sometimes it requires that. Sometimes it's that important. But I love what you do on a day-to-day basis, Jim. You are sometimes sacrificing yourself in order to help others to the point of where you're driving hundreds of miles a day just to try to assist families in doing that. It has nothing to do with race, color, or creed. It's just the fact that you have a heart to help, and that's where we have to be. That's where
You
we have
know,
to
some of the
stand.
best loans I've done are with African Americans. I did one of the coaches, former coaches, retired of Carter High School in Dallas,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and he was the best fish fryer I had ever been around, and I got to go to several of his fish fries that were just incredible. Now, I want to talk about another great local American that
Okay.
I got to know.
All
I
right.
was very, very blessed to get to know Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Yes.
Very, very, very much a political activist. Very, very great lady. Her godson is a very dear friend of mine, Gary Hasty. Gary
Mm-hmm.
Hasty started Heroes House, which is they took a burned out apartment complex, and Gary, with his background in construction, rebuilt that to where it looked brand new.
Mm.
And they leased up 50, what was it, Diane? 52 apartments to veterans using the HUD VASH voucher system.
Right.
So these guys were getting housing, they were getting people off the streets. Gary went on to do a deal down near the VA hospital on 52nd Street,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's working on more. I had breakfast with him this week, and we were talking about what's the next thing? Where are we going next?
Right.
Well,
Right.
when I was a real estate instructor many years ago, Gary came to me and he said, "Do you know anybody who'd be my broker?" And I said, "I will." And he and I became really close friends, and I helped him just a little bit, not as much as I wanted to, get Heroes House off the ground. And
Wonderful.
I'm on his 501c3 board. And I got to tell you, he took me to several events with Eddie Bernice Johnson, and I
Mm-hmm.
got to know her. Let me tell you something. That was a remarkable human being.
Yes.
To be in her presence and to be in her office and see all of a wall, I mean, down a hallway, a
Mm-hmm.
wall of awards that she got. And
Right.
she started off, she wanted to be a medical professional. So, you
Yeah.
know what one of her first jobs was? It was in the VA hospital in Dallas, and I would have to take a look and see. Let me look down here. Yeah, she was a nurse, but she was the first African American to serve as chief psychologist
Yep.
nurse at the Dallas VA hospital. Chief of psychology,
But she was
working
told,
with veterans. Did you know that?
I knew that, and I also she was told that because of her gender and her color, that she couldn't do that. That wasn't a good area to focus in, right?
Well, let me tell you, you talk about, I got to experience her from my relationship with Gary Hasty, and being around her was like being around my grandmother
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
being around my mother, because she would have been about the same age as my mother. And
Mm-hmm.
she was an incredible human being with an enormous heart. Yes, she was a Democrat. Yes, she was a liberal. Some people don't like that. But let me tell you, when you saw all of the things that she did and got done,
Right.
and she was in the Texas legislature, then she
Right.
was in the National Congress. She was a leader and she was an activist with that VA hospital down there. And I got to tell you, it was a remarkable thing to really get to know. Eddie Bernice Johnson, and she's no longer with us today, but part of this program is a tribute to a really, really great lady. Look her up on Wikipedia. You're going to find out what a great lady she is and was.
Yes,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry she's gone because
she passed away
Dallas is
last year.
gonna miss a tremendous lady.
Oh yeah, she passed away last year, and worked literally up until her last few days for the things that she believed in, for the advocacy of human rights, women's rights. And again, what I love about it is, again, it's not just African American, but it's just the rights of people.
All of
The
people.
rights. Exactly, exactly. That's where we need to. That's where we need to stand. Is the right for all people. Yes, there are some institutions and things in place to prevent that. But if the majority of us come together and stand on what we say we believe, all of that gets demolished in no time. In
Oh,
no time.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And Eddie Bernice Johnson, while this is Veterans Impact Show,
Right.
she was not a veteran, but she was such a huge supporter because she had worked in the VA hospital in Dallas.
Right.
And
Right.
she was responsible, I think, Gary may disagree with me, but she was really responsible for helping him to get Heroes House off the ground.
Mm.
And it's going to grow, it's going to be bigger and better as we develop housing to get veterans off the streets.
Yes.
And so I'm a huge supporter of Heroes House. I'm a huge supporter of what Eddie Bernice Johnson believed in supporting our veterans and supporting Gary Hasty, her godson. And let me tell you, Gary Hasty, I got to get the three of us together, just like I did with you and uh, Travis Wortham.
Yes.
It's a blessing to be with great men who are like minded in passion, persistence, and service. All
Let
of
me
you
tell
are.
you, Jim, I have to admit, in the short time that I've been working with you on this show, and I work with veterans almost every day, I can't tell you how much I've learned, how many resources that, and I thought I was pretty plugged in, but there's been a lot of great information that has come forth, and I'm trying to promote every opportunity I get to tell people, listen, even if you can't make the live show, go back and look at some of the previous shows because there's just a plethora of not good, but great information, great resources, great people to get to know. If you just take a moment and sit down and listen, it will inform you. It will hopefully entice others to do more because we don't know. Most people have no idea how many homeless veterans there are. Most people don't know how many veterans commit suicide every day. They say every 22 minutes, a veteran commits suicide, and that's because they feel like there's no hope, there's no resources, and it's better the best way out is to take my life. And there's resources that we can help them with to do things better.
You know, Cedric, this has become one of my passions as well. And that's why I've supported an organization called Symbiosis Integrated Health. What they're
Mm-hmm.
doing and the people that I've met, regardless of race or background, are getting well without drugs, needles, or knives, and
Yeah.
getting well thanks to the integrative technology in medicine and the diagnostics and the counseling and all the things. We had Dr.
Right.
Misty Ely on. We had Dr. Dee Dee Ashmore on. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about, we're talking about Black history, but let's talk about today's
Yes,
history
sir.
makers.
Yes, sir.
One of which I was trying to get Wendell to join us, and he couldn't today. But I want to honor Dr. Wendell Jones. He is the VA Heart of Texas Healthcare Network. He's the leader. He's the director of Vision 17. That's the state of Texas, except for Houston. Dr. Jones is a fantastic man. I've gotten to know him. Last time I saw him, I got a big bear hug from him. Wendell Jones is an African American who is a leader. He is a medical doctor. He
Right.
was an emergency care physician in Miami. Dr. Jones, his executive master's degree in business administration. He is over the VA healthcare in the state of Texas. Vision 17. An amazing man. He is history today. Why? Well, first of all, wasn't too many years ago, you talked about Eddie Bernice Johnson, and they said, well, your race and your gender aren't going to allow you to get. There were a lot of obstacles for medical doctors, for
Yes.
men and women of color to become medical doctors.
Yes.
Wendell Jones overcame that. Wendell Jones is a medical doctor. But Wendell Jones, while not a veteran, is passionate about saving veterans' lives and passionate about veterans. And he and his leadership team have really worked hard to help veterans throughout the state of Texas.
Yes. Yes.
And
You know what?
there is a leader today that we need to acknowledge and honor and say, Wendell Jones, thank you for all you're doing.
I mean, you're right on point, Jim, in so much that we remember those who are in our history. We remember those who have passed on and have done a great job in getting us to where we are today. We always say that every success, every accomplishment that we make today is because we're standing on somebody else's shoulders, right? What Dr. Wendell Jones is doing is so outstanding, and he's doing it today, right? We talked about Eddie Bernice Johnson. She passed away last year, right? But there's always a work to be done. We have a dear friend of ours that we know, and I was actually trying to get him. We call him Poppy. His name is Leo. Pronouncing it right, Leo Ulrich Parles, and he's 97 years old. He was a Marine. He was just recently, I want to say it was in 2017, he and a group of Marines that served with him were flown to the White House, and they were given the Congressional Medal of Honor for being some of the first African-American Marines to serve out of country, to actually go into combat. Because if you know anything about the history of our military, for a long time, African Americans were not allowed to serve in combat. We couldn't serve in any combat type of rating or rank. And so he was one of the very first ones. He's 97 in the VA system as we speak. And I wanted to get him on here, but it was just too short of a time frame. But people like that, people like, excuse me, Dr. Wendell Jones that you're talking about, that are still alive and well today, are prime examples of the fact that our country has and is making positive inroads and moving in the right direction. No, are we there where we need to be? No, we're not. Will we ever be? There's always been an issue, right? Jews against Gentiles, right? Back in the biblical times. So there's always been issues, but at some point we have to continue moving in the right direction. And I think we're doing that.
I think we're doing that too. And so we're honoring, and we've talked about several Americans who have been veterans, who have also supported veterans, Eddie Bernice Johnson, Dr. Wendell Jones. These people are really great, and we need more of them. That's why we want to showcase this and get it out. So, young men and women, I mean, we know we've got a recruiting problem in this country.
Yeah.
Young men and women need to be inspired by those who led the way, and the military has made the biggest difference, in my opinion,
That's right.
of racial relations in this nation. Hadn't been perfect, made a lot of mistakes, but we have come together more thanks to the military, in my opinion, than anything else.
Agreed.
Hadn't been perfect, hadn't been right, but the military, and you and I are ex-Navy. We are, well, we're not ex. Once you're a sailor, you're always a sailor.
That's right.
All right, this is the Veterans Impact Show, and I got to tell you, the allergies are tearing me up, and they're tearing you up.
Yes.
So we're going to be right back after these words from all of our partners. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show, and thanks to our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation. Cedric, brother, I am enjoying this, and what I absolutely would ask parents and families and young people to do is to look up some of these people that we're talking about.
Yes.
Look up. There is a female African American, and now I can't think of her name. I'm sorry, Harriet, who is an admiral. She's a four-star admiral, vice
Mm.
CNO. Um, I think we need to be able to look at the future to understand the accomplishments, to understand the quality that people bring and what the leadership brings to the United States. We wasn't perfect, but we led the way. When you
No,
think
you're
about, yeah,
I'm sorry, Jim. I just want to say you're
no,
right on point. You're right on point, right? We know we're not perfect. None of us are. But if I always say perfection belongs to God, but we can definitely operate in excellence. That's my mindset. We can get better than we have been. We can do better toward one another. And there's so many examples of great Americans out there that we can follow after. And listen, yes, I'm an African American man. You're a Caucasian, right? But regardless of color, can we get below that and get to the character? If I cut you, you cut me. We both bleed red. I would like to think that we bleed red, white, and blue for our
no,
country.
navy
Navy
blue,
blue,
brother.
okay. But I'd love to think that that's our mindset and that's what we carry, trying to love and do right toward one another. I really would love that.
I think also when we come together and we work together as a team, we are setting an example for the next generation. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things I like about the military because by the time I came along in the 1960s, we had black guys in our squadron, we had
Hmm.
black guys on our ship,
Hmm.
and there was no color
Hmm.
because we were all in there together.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
you got I got your back, you got my back.
That's it.
This is something that we need to think about, and we need to think about let's don't do away with history. Let's don't do away with the monuments. Let's let them be reminders of where we've come from
Right.
and where we never want to go back to.
Jim, I have a friend. He spent literally 41 years in the Navy. He was a friend. He worked under me on my missile launcher on the USS Arkansas. We were both gunners mates. He went on to become an officer. And he still keeps in contact with me. His name is John Belief. Dear friend, talk about friends for life. And he was a white guy. I was a black guy. My daughter grew up with him and his wife. I mean, just beautiful people. And color never had a thing to do with it. That's where we need to stand. Get away from the color. Hey, I can stay in the sun a little longer, but it doesn't matter. We should
In boot camp, I finally found out you guys do tan.
we
Because,
do.
because
We do.
remember the white
Yes.
hats we had to wear,
Yes.
and you'd see a tan line. I walked up, one of the guys in my boot camp that was African American. I walked up to him, he had his hat off, and he goes, I never knew you guys tanned.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We do.
But he was as good, if not better, because of the passion. One of the things I'd like to point out, because a lot of people are so offended by the history and what happened in the past. Here's another way to look at it. Yes, it happened. Yes, it was horrible. No, it should have never happened. But without a doubt, it brought about the passion and the resolve of men like Martin Luther King, Eddie
Yes.
Bernice Johnson, Wendell
Yes.
Jones. How
Yes.
many more?
Right.
If you really want to dig deep into Black history, it's amazing when you find the doctors, the lawyers, the people who have contributed so much.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you
My
go,
my my heart, Jim, is I tell people all the time, especially when it comes to forgiveness, right? I'm not telling you to forget the past, not at all. What I am telling you is not to continue trying to move forward by constantly looking backwards. We can't continue to look backwards and try to make progress moving forward. Remember what happened, right? Let's be thankful that it's not happening today like it did back then. But let's try to collectively move forward together, and we're so much more powerful when we work together.
and right now, we need to bring this nation together because I
Yeah.
think we're more divided, and I think I blame the press for that. I'm sorry, I really do.
Hmm.
Because of sensationalism. We need to
Right.
be focusing on the people that are doing incredible things in our community, men and women who are accomplishing a very great deal. And
Yes.
we need to look past color, whether
Yeah.
it's African American, white, Chinese, Latino, you
Right.
name it. Let's
Right.
work together. Okay,
Right.
we've got these people who came through our border illegally. What are we going to do to help them?
Yep.
What are we going to do to help them to integrate into our society and to understand what it is to live in a constitutional republic, in
Hmm.
a democracy?
Right.
How can we help them to help us be better
Be better.
together?
That's
You
it.
know,
That's it.
without
In a
a doubt.
nutshell.
So, listen, brother, we're coming up on the end of this hour. It has been fantastic. Again, I ask people, please share this. Please focus on the excellence. Please be a part of Veterans Impact Show. We are working to make an impact in our community.
Yes.
So, Cedric, you're the minister. I'm just a chaplain. That's a lowly. Okay. You lead us in our closing prayer. Please, sir.
Will do. Will do. Thank you, Jim. Well, Father, we first thank you for the opportunity to come together, to show love, to show our ability to work together, our hearts to work together, and show that if we'll put forth the effort, great things can happen together. Father God, bring us back to that point to where we are, that nation that came together because of you. We're one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We thank you today. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Now, Cedric, next week, I've got Richard Canis, Colonel Richard Canis. He's going to be
Okay.
talking about our community salutes. Here is a great thing for families to know about, kids to know about. We honor high school graduates who are going into
Yes.
the military. We honor those young men and women who are following the great tradition of military service. So, our community salutes next week. We're here for you. And Cedric,